Dajahao, hi guys, it's Shimei and welcome back to my channel, and today I'm continuing my read along for ErHa Volume 2. I want to say I'm excited because there will always be a part of me that's excited to continue the story, but also I'm just beyond nervous because, like, just when you think this can't get any more grim, they just prove you wrong. Like, Meat Bun just has an amazing way of making you think, okay, the worst is over, and then the worst is indeed not over. So, I mean, I had someone message me, and they were like, "Oh, don't worry, it gets worse." And I'm like, that's not comforting. Oh goodness. Anyway, so yeah, we're gonna be continuing today with that. I suppose I should technically just wait a little bit, but in the meantime, please let me know if the audio is okay and if everything sounds the way it's supposed to sound. We are currently on page, I think, 287. Let me just check. Okay, no, we are on page 286, right at the top. Okay. Yay, thank you for letting me know about the audio, and hi, hope you're well. Okay, so since we're trying to do this thing of me like being patient and allowing people to arrive, how was everyone's like last night? I had people over, and then I tried to export a very big project and it failed miserably. That was a headache and a half. And I have a new show that I'm currently like binging that I'm really excited about, but that I can't yet share with you guys, and it sucks. And I have a video to film that I keep forgetting about that I have to film tonight after this. So anyway, my brain is so chaotic at the moment, but it's okay. Okay, I think let's just see what's going on. Should I give 3 more minutes? I'm not sure. I'm always way too impatient, I know. Just like total side note, I don't know if Vivi is going to be sharing photos of it on the Discord, but Vivi, who is the moderator for the channel at the moment, she went to a like anime con type thing. She dressed up as Jan Busche from A Thousand Autumns, and then she like there were a few Hualians, and then there was also like Wang Xian, and then she actually came across a Chuaning, and like it's so cool. Anyway, okay, sorry. I'm live in envy because we don't really have a very big Danmei fan base over here in South Africa, at least not that I've discovered. Okay, I think it's enough time. I think I'm just gonna dive into it. So let's go. At this time, Shimei also stepped forward, but his mannerisms were far too soft to be imposing, and there was fear in his voice as he said, "Everyone, I can also vouch for them. They absolutely wouldn't hurt Miss 18, so please hear them out. Thank you." Ye Wangxi stepped forward as well. Although he didn't vouch for them, he was much steadier than the rest of the agitated crowd. Even if it's for a temporary detainment, they deserve that chance to explain and defend themselves. Otherwise, we might let the real killer off the hook. What if that person is among us as we speak? What then? At his words, the people in the crowd immediately started looking at one another with alarm in their eyes. "Fine, we'll hear you out first. We're still going to lock you up. Can't be too cautious after all. Guilty until proven innocent." That's not usually how it goes, but okay. Moran let out a breath and and laid thankful hands. What? Let out a breath and laid thankful hands before his forehead. Then, after a moment, he actually smiled. I never imagined that when I was surrounded on all sides, anyone would still be willing to believe me. Okay. Even if I get locked up, just for you three, I won't be mad about it. Moran simply and briefly went over what had happened, from the manifestation of the illusion and the events that had transpired within it, to finding 18 murdered upon exit. Unfortunately, once a domain of fiend scenario was overcome, a brand new illusion was created for the next person to enter, so there was no way to validate Moran's claims. It did seem like a stretch for him to have come up with such an elaborate story in mere moments, if he was making it up. So by the time he finished, more than half the people in the crowd seemed to be wavering. A higher-up of the feathered tribe spoke quietly to her subordinates, then said, "Moran, Shasini, although you have presented explanations, you have no evidence. For the safety of Peach Blossom Springs, we must detain you until the matter has been resolved." Moran smiled helplessly. All right. I figured it'd be like that. I won't complain too much as long as you feed me." "Of course we shall do so." She paused. "Henceforth, everyone, please be on your guard to prevent any further accidents. Anyone who did not arrive here with due swiftness will be questioned one by one to eliminate suspicion. Furthermore, I will be informing the leaders of each sect, especially Shizun Peak, which is most heavily involved. If possible, I would like to invite your Shizun here for a chat." Oh, that's not gonna work. At this, Moran's expression instantly changed. "Shizun?" Chuaning stood quietly without a word. "I don't want Shizun to come. Will my uncle do?" "Issues involving a disciple shall be reported to their master. This has always been the rule in the cultivation world. Is it different in Shizun Peak?" "No, but—" Moran scratched his head in frustration, letting out one sigh after another, but he didn't know what to say. Issues involving a disciple shall be reported to their master. Of course, that made sense. However, the mere thought of Chuaning's indifferent face and his crisp, cold eyes, it made Moran certain that if his Shizun were to come, he would doubtlessly give Moran a dressing down first and foremost, regardless of who was in the right and who was in the wrong. Moran would prefer not to see him at all. In the end, no matter what he said, there was nothing he could do. Both he and his little Shidi got locked up. Yeah, this is not gonna work out. I struggle to see how all of this is gonna fit together. The prison at Peach Blossom Springs was a cave, not very big, but also not too small, and its entrance was covered by ancient brambles that only obeyed the commands of the feathered tribe. The interior never saw the light of day, but thankfully there was a fire pit with enchanted flames that burned continuously. The furnishings inside were simple: a wide, plain bed of stone, padded with golden red cushions made of woven feathers, a stone table and 4 stone stools, 1 copper mirror, and a couple of sets of bowls and cups. Moran and Chuaning were imprisoned there together. Although judgment had yet to be passed, the one in charge of them seemed to be close to 18. As 18 had lost her life for no apparent reason, the feathered tribe guard took it out on them by making their lives more difficult. On the first night, the guard deigned to deliver some food. It wasn't great or much, but there was enough to eat. However, by the second day, she brought only some raw meat, vegetables, rice, flour, and salt, which she tossed casually into the cave, along with a few words about not having the time to take care of their meals, and how they should sort it out themselves. "Fine, we will sort it out ourselves then. It's just cooking. What's so hard about it?" I don't know if either you or Chuaning can say that. Moran muttered huffily where he was crouched on the ground, picking up the usable ingredients. What else should he want to eat? Whatever. Moran sighed. There's no dish more difficult to cook than the one called whatever. That is the wisest words I think Moran has ever spoken. Let's see here. We have pork belly, napa cabbage. Tsk. This bird sure is stinging. It's only the outer layer of the cabbage. There's quite a bit of rice and flour, but I'm not sure how many days this is supposed to last us, he muttered while counting the ingredients, then looking up at Chuaning. Do you want rice or noodles? Chuaning was resting on the bed, tummy down. He thought about it, then said, noodles. A pause. Then he added, soup noodles with spare ribs. Ah, where am I gonna get spare ribs? Then whatever's fine. Moran sat cross-legged on the ground, one hand on his knee, cheeks squished against the other, and thought for a bit. There aren't many ingredients here. How about noodles with minced meat? Noodles with minced meat? Would you like that? Sure. Is it spicy? Moran grinned. There isn't even a shadow of pepper in what the bird gave us. I mean, that's gonna work for one person, but not for the other. With dinner decided, Moran set about kneading dough. Chuaning was short and not that strong, so he didn't bother trying to make a pretense of helping. He watched Moran knead the soft white ball from where he lay in bed, his gaze growing softer. Chuaning suddenly felt that this wasn't so bad. Moran didn't know who he was, so he could stay by his side, and when Moran cooked, he bothered to ask what Chuaning wanted to eat. It really wasn't bad. He even felt a little uneasy, as if he had been given too much, as if he had stolen it all from a child named Shasini. Moran finished cooking the noodles and placed the stir-fried mincemeat on top. They had pitiful few seasonings, so he couldn't make anything fancy, but the noodles were pulled to a chewy consistency with just the right softness. He had also cut off the fatty part of the pork and used it to fry the meat. Okay, so he didn't lie when he said it can't be that difficult, because clearly he actually knows what he's doing. That's surprising, I will admit. Hold on, sorry. The meat sizzled as it was poured over the noodles, and it would no doubt be delicious once mixed in. Shidi, dinner's... Moran looked up to find Chuaning had fallen asleep, still laying tummy down, face turned to the side, with the head pillowed on his arms. His long lashes rested against his cheeks, his expression peaceful. Ready? Moran finished at a mumble, then walked over to the bed and stroked Chuaning's smooth, inky hair. When I see you like this, you really do look like Shizun. I wonder what relationship you have with Shizun and the true family of Linan. Also, exactly who's after us. Moran sighed. Wonder what Shizun's up to right now. If he knew what had happened here, would he blame me again, regardless of everything else? The color in Moran's eyes darkened a little as he played with the strand of Chuaning's hair around his finger. He sighed again, faintly. You don't know him, but any time anything happens, he always gives me hell. He really doesn't like me at all. However, Chuaning was asleep, and these words scattered weightlessly into the silence of the night without an answer, just like the misunderstandings that had coiled around them from decades and decades ago, and across 2 different lifetimes. I hate this so much because, like, the way that Meat Bun is phrasing it, she's making it so clear that if we had any hope that these misunderstandings would resolve themselves, we can just, like, let that hope die. And I don't want it to die. Moran waited for the noodles to cool down a bit before waking Chuaning. Shidi, dinner's ready. Chuaning covered a yawn and blinked blearily. Oh, dinner. Moran carried the noodles over. He liked to cook, but he hated doing the dishes, So purely for the sake of having one less dish to wash, he had dumped the noodles directly into the pot in which he'd fry the meat. Chuaning was flabbergasted by this unorthodox and uncultured way of eating, his eyes wide as he stared disbelievingly at the big pot of noodles. How are we supposed to eat this? Together, of course. Moran handed him a pair of chopsticks and was already putting his hands together with a grin. The race to see who can scoop out more noodles is about to begin. Who's gonna get to eat more? We're about to find out. Chuaning had no words. Moran laughed gleefully, his eyes smiling. Chuaning stared at him for a moment before saying, "It's almost like, as long as you have food, you're very, very happy, right?" Ha! Food is the most important thing, after all. Moran cheekily scooped up a big clump of noodles for himself, slurping it all up until his cheeks puffed out. "It doesn't look great, but it's pretty tasty." Chuaning's expression was dark as he stared for a long moment before he eventually said, "Don't slurp while you eat." Of course that would be his issue. Moran laughed, slapping his leg. "How was a little kid like you so much like my Shizun? He also tells me not to slurp. But you know what? Once, when I was eating with him, I purposefully threw a bone in his bowl, and he got so mad." Chuaning ground his teeth. "Impudent. Yeah. That was exactly his reaction. How did you know? Even the delivery was just like his. Hey, Shidi, seriously, I think you two might be distant relatives. Why don't you ask Shizun about it when he gets here?" Wait, no, not the egg. The egg's mine." Oh, goodness. Okay. Chapter 72. This Venerable One stews soup. At night, the two of them lay on the wide stone bed, trying to pass the time while locked up was a task in and of itself. They had already trained and eaten, and now there was nothing else to do. Chuaning, calm and tranquil by nature, wasn't at all bothered, but Moran paced this way and that in the constricted confines of the cave, and time only seemed to crawl even slower. "Ah, I'm so bored. So bored." What to do? "Sleep," Chuaning said, his eyes closed. "But it's still so early." Moran glanced at the hourglass and shook his head. "Way too early." Chuaning ignored him. Moran rolled about on the bed, then scooted over and tugged at his cheek. "Shidi?" Chuaning continued to ignore him. "Shidi?" Chuaning steadfastly continued to ignore him. "Shidi?" Chuaning's eyes flew open angrily. "What do you want?" Moran took Chuaning's hands in his own and shamelessly swung their joined limbs back and forth. "Play with me." Oh my word. Like, the one is in the child's body, but the other one is the child at heart. I have to say I am vaguely worried because it feels like the person who murdered 18 maybe did it not so much to get Moran to like suffer permanently, but to keep them out of the way temporarily, because otherwise they might be able to stop him from doing something. And I'm vaguely concerned as to what that might be. Am I the Shidi here, or are you? Chuaning wrenched his hands back beyond R8. Who's gonna fool around with you? Moran smiled sweetly, truly and completely shameless. You, of course. Who else is there? Chuaning had no response. Moran took off the narrow red cord holding his hair up, tied the ends together, and wove it into a distinct pattern around his fingers. Despite his protest, Chuaning sat up after all. "What is this?" he asked grumpily. "How do you play?" "It's called Cat's Cradle. Mostly girls play it. Not so much boys. But I grew up in a house full of girls, so I ended up learning it too." Chuaning eyed him. "It's pretty fun, actually. See, hook your fingers around this string here. No, not that finger. Use your pinkies. Yes, like that. Then take your thumb and forefinger and hook it around these two strings here. Moran instructed him slowly and patiently. The candle flame crackled, casting its warm light on them, one big and one small. Their heads lowered in concentration as they passed the loop of red string made from a hair tie back and forth, their expressions slowly softening. Chuaning had segments of the string taut between his fingers as he followed Moran's instructions to weave a new pattern. Then he accidentally missed a loop. When the red string exchanged hands, rather than transforming into a new pattern, it returned to its original shape, a simple circle. Chuaning stared at it blankly, hands held in mid-air, face full of incomprehension. Why did it fall apart? He muttered. What happened? Huh, you probably missed a loop again. Again? No more, no more. Moran laughed. Doing the same thing over and over gets boring. Let's do something else. No. Now it was Chuaning's turn to be displeased. One more time. Moran gaped speechlessly at him. No, I get it. You have to master it now that you've started. But the way he says... Oh, okay, no. I misunderstood. I thought that Moran had said, like, oh, you missed it again, and that he was accidentally thinking about Chuaning or something to that extent, and not, like, really present in the moment. But now I'm reading, it's just him, like, being like, no, let's do it again. They spent 3 days in the cave. Their fourth night found Moran busy preparing to cook something delicious for Chuaning as usual. He had figured out a few things during these last few days together, like that his little Shidi truly was from the same place as the Shizun. They even had the exact same tastes in food. Tonight's delivery from the Feather Tribe Guard was a hen and a couple of mushrooms. Moran planned to make chicken soup with mushrooms, then add some of his handmade noodles. Altogether, it wouldn't taste too bad. Are we having chicken soup tonight? Mm-hmm. Moran glanced sideways at Chuaning. The kid was a genius when it came to martial arts, yet he couldn't grasp the cat's cradle. He was also stubborn to a fault, and every chance he got, he played with a hair quilt, trying to figure it out. Moran couldn't help smiling at his mulish expression. Feel free to play with it while I cook, Moran said with a smile, but I'm afraid the soup's gonna finish stewing before you work it out. That's just rude. Chuaning let out a cold and paused. Is there any ginger left? Let me see. Yep, there's plenty. They gave us a bunch yesterday. Chuaning made a satisfied sound. Put some in. It gets rid of the raw meat smell. Moran stroked his chin. Oh, and let me guess, add some wolfberries too? Chuaning's eyes brightened. Do we have some? Pfft, of course not. I was just thinking that your tastes really are exactly like Shizun's. He also likes ginger and wolfberries in his soup. Do you remember what he likes to eat? Huh, yep. I'm super clever. Moran didn't feel like explaining. Anyway, it wasn't like he could talk about things like past lives with his little Shidi, so he rolled with it. I'm the very embodiment of the 24 paragons of filial piety, don't you know? It's too bad that Shizun doesn't see my heartfelt sincerity. Moran began cleaning the chicken as he spoke absently, and thus he wholly missed Chuaning's expression. He plucked the feathers and removed the innards with a quick, practiced hand, and was about to boil the blood out when he heard his little Shidi say in a quiet voice, He isn't necessarily unaware. Huh? When Moran looked up, the tips of Chuaning's ears reddened. He turned away and cleared his throat. I said, the Yuheng elder isn't necessarily unaware that you're good to him. Oh, that. It doesn't really matter. I'm used to it. Even though I did wish once that he would be like other people's masters and ask after me sometimes, or that he'd occasionally remember my preferences, like how I know that he likes to eat what he likes to eat. That's all in the past now. When I first entered the sect, I was fooled by his pretty looks and thought he was a gentle person. Thinking back on it now, it really ran side. My esteemed Shizun is illustrious and unapproachable, and he's too busy on top of that. How could I possibly dare to hope for his attention? At first these words made Chuaning a bit cross, but then he thought about them. Although he was concerned about Moran in their daily life, he did indeed maintain a veneer of aloofness and distance. He hung his head wordlessly, and anger turned into consternation. After a while, he hopped off the bed and walked quietly over to Moran. "What's up? You're always the one cooking. Today's meal is uncomplicated, so I'll cook it for you instead." Moran blinked, then smiled. "Where's this coming from?" "You're too short to reach the stove. How are you going to cook? Besides, I'm your Shishong. Now that you've called me that, the least I can do is feed you." Chuaning carried a stool over and climbed onto it, then stared at him stubbornly without saying a word. Rand blinked mutely. "Why are you glaring at me?" "I can reach the stove just fine." Rand eyed him silently. "The Yuheng elder may not know what you like to eat, but I'm not heartless like him," Chuaning said expressionlessly. "Go take a break. I'll cook." And so Chuaning busied himself with the dinner preparations, refusing to let Moran help even a little. He had an aura of menace, and there was a concentrated ferocity in his eyes as he lifted the kitchen knife high in the air and brought it stiffly down on the poor chicken. Yeah, because the thing is, I'm just thinking about his, like, stew or whatever he made previously. I can't remember. Was it dumplings? But the thing that he made at Surgeon Peak in his normal form, that did not turn out well. And I'm scared that he's going to end up ruining dinner as well by accident, even though he means well. Moran almost couldn't bear to look. Moran tried to help, but even his little Shidi's temper was exactly like his Shizun, and Chuaning hated getting interrupted when he was concentrating. In the end, Moran could only scratch his head and wander off to go flop on the bed. Having finally put the chicken in the pot, Chuaning covered it with a clay lid and was about to return to say something when he heard a quiet voice from the cave entrance. "Aran? Shashidi? Are you there?" As soon as Moran heard this voice, he leapt off the bed as if he had been struck by lightning and dashed to the entrance. Through a gap between the brambles, the first person he saw was someone from the feathered tribe. She stood there coldly, but when Moran looked around he found Shimei behind her, dressed in his usual white and his face full of worry. Moran was ecstatic. "Shimei! What are you doing here?" "I have something important to tell you," Shimei said. "The sect leader received the report and immediately rushed to Peach Blossom Springs. He's negotiating with the feathered tribe as we speak. How have you been? Are they treating you okay?" "I'm great, eating well, drinking well, and living as well. And lively as well, sorry." I mean, because my brain was like, yeah, living as well makes sense, because he has no standards. So just him living would be good in his opinion. But that's not quite what he meant. "What about Shizun? Where is he? I heard he's still in seclusion and didn't come." "Oh." Something flickered past Moran's eyes, then he sighed. "It's fine if he didn't come," he mumbled to himself. "It's fine." "But the Shengji elder came to vouch for Shidi," Shimei said. "Is Shidi already asleep?" "No, he's making soup. Shidi, come over here." Chuaning put down the little bamboo fan he was using to fan the flames and walked to the entrance. He looked at the two people outside, expression not the least bit surprised, and said flatly, "What is it?" Shimei didn't get a chance to speak before the Feather Tribe representative humphed. What else could it be? She shot back. People from Session Peak came. Your master says he'll vouch for you, and is meeting with our great immortal lord right now. My master? The Xianji elder. Oh, Chuaning paused, face totally expressionless. Good. The corner of the Feathered Tribe representative's mouth twitched. You two can come out. Everyone is gathered at the Dusa pavilion, waiting to hear your explanations. But they already gave it! Stu, it turned out in a dark color. Thank you. I was like, I know he made something, but I can't remember exactly what it was. Just want to see. Okay. Chuaning turned to look at the chicken soup on the stove. I'll pass. The soup isn't done cooking yet, and I have to keep an eye on it. Moran, you can speak for me. Chuaning! I love you, but oh my word, you're a walking disaster sometimes. You're just as bad as Moran. These words made the Feathered Tribe representative think the child was immature and unreasonable. She smiled coldly, wanting to scare him. You'll miss your chance to defend yourself if you don't go, and if you are deemed to be the murderer, there goes your head. However, Chuaning wasn't the least bit concerned. He wore an indifferent face as he stared at her sent her a cold glance and turned to leave. Shimei was about to call after him, but Moran shook his head with a smile. Let him be. I'll go. But the Shinji elder came all this way. It would be rude not to greet him. Before Moran could say anything, Chuaning's voice came from afar. Mo Shishong, please send Shizun my regards. Shimei was struck speechless. He'd spoken so quietly, but the boy had still heard him. Feeling a little awkward, he had cleared his throat and waited for the Feather Tribe representative to open the brambles covering the cave entrance, then grabbed Moran to leave. Unexpectedly, Chuaning turned around and called out, Shishong? Moran smiled. Did Shidi change his mind? You want to come along after all? Chuaning's little hand waved in his sleeve. Of course not. I just wanted to remind you to come back soon, or the soup will go cold. Moran blinked, then laughed helplessly. All right, wait for me. Chuaning said nothing else as he watched Moran walk away and disappear behind a corner. Then he turned back around to attend to the soup. The Dusa pavilion wasn't far from the prison cave. On the way there, Shimei said offhandedly, Aran, you seem to have grown even closer to Shidi these days. Moran smiled. Yeah, we went through a lot together. What? Is Shimei jealous of a little kid? There was a beat of silence before Shimei said, Nonsense. Huh, no need to worry. My favorite person is and always will be Shimei. Enough nonsense. I just feel like Shashidi is a little odd. Odd? Oh! Moran thought for a bit, then nodded. I guess he is pretty odd. You think so too? Yep, Moran grinned. He's such a little thing, but he talks like an adult, and his power is no laughing matter either. Oh, and I haven't had a chance to tell you guys yet, but the stuff that happened in the illusions was even more bizarre. I think he might be a distant relative of our Shizun, you know? Shimei's eyes shifted slightly. Why do you say that? We saw someone in the illusion. The son of the Lin-An governor from 200 years ago. His surname was also Chu, and he looked like Shizun. And his son also looked like... When Moran was getting to the important part, a sudden bout of loud cursing burst from in front of them. He looked up just in time to see Shimei striding over, face dark as a thundercloud, still cursing without stop. Bastard! Beast! Shameless mutt! Oh goodness, what happened now? Do I even want to know? Oy, oy, oy. Chapter 73. This venerable one is confused. Having run into Moran so suddenly, Shimei blinked. This was the first time the two had come face to face since Moran's detention. When Moran recalled how Shimei had defended him in front of the crowd, he smiled at his cousin despite himself. Shimei, however, was thoroughly shocked by this grin. "What?" he said contemptuously, face full of disgust. "What are you looking at? What are you smiling about? What's there to smile about?" "I'm greeting you." "Disgusting." Moran blinked, stupefied. This comeback had thoroughly killed Moran's conversation starter. I can imagine. Shimei hummed pensively for a moment, but didn't push for further answers either, instead turning to Shimei with a smile. "Young master, who's annoyed you now? Who else could it be? Who else could it be? Depraved, despicable, disgusting, obscene." Moran sighed. "That doesn't alliterate." "Who cares? You do it then, if you're so great." "I'm not great. I'm uncultured." Moran chuckled. "Come on, tell us. Who pissed you off?" I kind of love this dynamic. I can't. "I bet it was Dashishung again," Shimei said with a smile. "Frickin' Dashishung. Beast. Pervert. If he sleeps around so much, how come he doesn't have an STD? Oh. Darn, okay. I'd happily give up 10 years of my life to curse him with sores on his head and pus oozing from his feet. Maybe his nose and eyes rot off. Let's see who still thinks he's so hot then. That despicable, shameless, obscene..." Moran blinked, stupefied once again. Knowing that Shimei was about to sink into an endless cycle, Shimei hastily stopped him and pointed back down the road. "Shh, look. Those lady cultivators who like Dashishung are here." Shimei jumped with a squawk, a trace of trepidation flashing across his perpetually prideful face. "Filthy degenerates," he swore under his breath. Even so, he did indeed turn and bolt, tail between his legs like a stray dog. In a last-ditch attempt to save his dignity, he snapped before leaving, "I suddenly remembered I've got something to do, so I'm heading off now." Moran watched him scamper out of sight. "Wow," he said, amazed. "This Dashishung is really something. If he can scare Shimei that badly." Why am I getting a feeling that Dashishung is the villain in disguise? I don't know. Maybe not. Maybe that would be too convenient. Shimei held back a laugh. It's been like this ever since Chuaning ran into him at the restaurant the other day and got into a scuffle. I guess he's met his match. Amazing, amazing. I've got to see him for myself, sometime. Those were the words that left Moran's lips, but inwardly he already knew more or less what was going on. If this Dashishung could make Shimei hide like this, he was definitely the person Moran was thinking of. Now wasn't the time to enjoy the spectacle of Shimei, however. Xu Zhengyong and the Xunji elder had arrived at the Dusip pavilion and were softly discussing 18's murder with the master of Peach Blossom Springs, the elder immortal of the feathered tribe. The elder immortal was practically divine. A glow of spiritual light encircled and enveloped her body, and while she looked to be a young woman of a fair, tender age, heavens knew how old she actually was. She was explaining the case calmly to Xu Zhengyong when a personal attendant walked in and reported in a low voice, "Elder Immortal, we've brought them." "Send them in." Moran followed Shimei into the warm pavilion and scanned the area. The second he saw Xu Zhengyong fanning the infamous fan while speaking to the others, he called out, "Uncle!" My child, my child." Xu Zhengyong looked over at the sound of Moran's voice. His eyes lit up and he hastened to beckon them over. "Come, sit next to your uncle," he said, patting Moran's shoulder. "I didn't kill her." "Of course you didn't, of course not." Shizun sighed again and again. I can't imagine how this misunderstanding came about. The elder immortal told me everything, and I came to help prove your innocence. He sighed yet again. Heavens have mercy, look how downtrodden you are. He pulled Moran over, and the elder immortal of the feather tribe didn't stop him, only watching them with impassive eyes. Moran also greeted the Shrenji elder, and swiftly sat down next to Shizun. However, it struck Moran as odd that Shrenji didn't immediately notice the absence of his own disciple, Shasani. Instead, he nodded absently at Moran. It was ultimately the elder immortal of the feather tribe who said, "Eh? Where's the other child? The one named Xia." Oh goodness. I don't know why I'm so terrified. I don't feel like I have any clue how to predict where this a novel is gonna go next. So it feels very uneasy. Because I feel like I could be caught off guard by the worst twist at any moment. Ah, that's right. Only then the Chunji seemed to realize. Where's my disciple? To Moran's eyes, this was an obvious lack of care for Shasani, and he was somewhat upset. My Shidi is still locked up. He asked me to greet you on his behalf. Is that so? Shenji nodded. Why didn't he come? He's cooking, Moran replied curtly. His answer was met with stunned silence. I mean, fair. Once Shizun recovered from his bewilderment, he laughed. Is cooking more important than clearing his name? What a headstrong child, Shenji said, smiling. I'll go check on him once the meeting's over. No need. We're having dinner together after this, Moran said. Interrogate me however you will, but let's get this over and done with. Thus, Shizun spoke. Elder Immortal, let's continue our earlier discussion. How about this? We have an elder in our sect who is skilled in the art of refining pulls. Before I came, I asked him to create a number of purity pulls. Purity pulls? The elder immortal was slightly taken aback, and she lightly tapped the corner of her lips with a dainty crimson finger. Are those the thoughts that can make mortals speak absolute truth? That's correct. The elder immortal was rather surprised. The materials required to make these things are complex and difficult to refine, and even here in Peach Blossom Springs, it would take at least half a month to produce such a pull. I'm amazed to hear that Xianjun's sect has such a master of medicines. Why didn't you bring him along? He's antisocial and doesn't like to travel with others, Shizun replied. The pulls are currently being refined, and they can be sent to Peach Blossom Springs by pigeon within 10 days. When the time comes, I invite the elder immortal to verify the effectiveness of the pulls, then have the young disciples take them. The truth will be revealed at that time. No, but this is a disaster, because what if someone asks something about, like, Chuaning's true identity, and then he has to spill the beans? I don't think this is going to work well. The elder immortal contemplated in silence for a moment, then inclined her head. This is acceptable. Shizun sighed a breath of relief and smiled. Then, if that's the case, let me go bring my other disciple out of the prison cave right away. Hold it. What is it? Until this affair is sorted out, both Moran and Chastity remain under suspicion, the elder immortal said. Even with the sect leader's insurance, this venerable one cannot let those two walk free. At this, Shizun snapped his fan shut with a smack. While a smile lingered on his face, his gaze had grown colder. Now, that's a little disingenuous, elder immortal. The elder immortal of the feathered tribe raised her gaze and stared at him with a pair of scarlet eyes. Is Shizun dissatisfied with this venerable one's decision? But of course, a guilty verdict has yet to be delivered to my sect's disciples. since the Elder Immortal has the guarantee of both myself and the Shinji Elder that we'll keep watch over them, what reason is there to keep them detained? It isn't a true detention, the Elder Immortal said coldly. They aren't mistreated, and their daily meals go uninterrupted. I've only restricted their movements. That isn't unreasonable. No, but the fact that they keep on having to cook for themselves because your god is spiteful might be seen as a little bit unreasonable. Shizun was still smiling, but the smile remained cold. Not unreasonable. From what I heard, that prison cave never sees the light of the sun or the moon. It's where you lock up criminals who've proven guilty. The Elder Immortal's choice to go and call it not unreasonable is pure lip service. Shizun Shi, a feathered tribe guard by the side, said sternly, "Please watch your tongue." "What? Have I said something rude?" "I'm not humiliating or insulting you, your Elder Immortal, and I've said nothing but the truth. Maybe my words aren't courteous, but they're not unreasonable." You know, I liked Xu Jingyong before, but now I'm like, I'm living. Yes, I'm South African. Is it very obvious from my accent, I'm assuming? The response left the feathered tribe guard even more enraged. "You!" A hand pale as jade reached out and stopped him. The Elder Immortal raised her head and smiled coldly at Xu Jingyong. Rumor from the mortal realm has it that sorry, I struggle with that, of Sishin Peak was just a pretty face, with strength to spare but rather short on wits. Certainly not one for wordplay. Now this venerable one sees that rumors were rather misleading, for Shizun Shi is in truth quite the well-reasoned individual. Xu Jingyong also flashed her a smile, but there was no more mirth left in his eyes. "I'm but a vulgar man. Please don't mind me, Elder Immortal." The Elder Immortal of the feathered tribe grinned, raised her hand, and picked a tangerine. She peeled it with great care before holding the peeled fruit out to Xu Jingyong. "Then why don't you and I both take a step back? It will not be possible to grant your disciples the same freedom as before, but leaving them in the prison certainly isn't appropriate either. This venerable one will order Shasini's immediate release, and Moran and Shasini will hence be launched in the campus pavilion, which is a place for receiving guests. The only concession I require is that people be sent to watch them, and that they be forbidden from taking even half a step out of the pavilion. Is that agreeable?" Xu Jingyong was silent for a bit. Then he raised his hand. It was hovering in mid-air for a long moment, but eventually he accepted the tangerine. Okay, let's see what's going on in the comments, because it kind of seems a little bit ridiculous. I like Uncle. Okay, just give me a second, guys. Because I'm assuming there's a troll here. And if you're not, then sorry about that. Okay. Sorry, Campsus, not campus. Campsus Pavilion might have been accommodation meant for guests, but Peach Blossom Springs didn't receive guests all that often. As such, the interior of the pavilion had been neglected for a long time. Since the elder immortal had permitted them to move in, Moran decided to go over and clean, then return to pick up Shasani once everything was tidy. Xu Zhengyong and Shenji still had things to discuss, so under the watch of several members of the feathered tribe, Moran and Shimei went to the campus's pavilion first. Campus's pavilion was situated in the northwest area of Peach Blossom Springs, a veritable forest of flowers blooming around it, making for brilliant glowing haze lit by the setting sun. "This is a good place. It won't be so bad to stay here," Moran said happily. Shimei sighed. "How is this a good place? The two of you are innocent. You didn't kill anyone, yet you've been accused of doing so. Too bad Shizun couldn't come. If he had, then he could use Tianwen to interrogate you, and there wouldn't be any use for purity pills in order to reveal the truth." If only it were that straightforward. Tianwen is a holy weapon, but while it has the ability to eke out the truth, its effectiveness is entirely dependent on whether the user really intends to interrogate someone. "Do you think those birds would be willing to let my Shizun interrogate me? Do you think they'd believe him?" That's actually quite fair. I didn't even think of that. That's true. As the sun was about to set, Moran set about tidying the house with Shimei's assistance. It certainly was strange. Only when Moran finished cleaning the pavilion and sat down to rest and drink tea did he realize that he didn't feel any secret joy in being able to spend time alone with Shimei. Nor was he having any flirtatious thoughts. Moran choked at the realization and almost spat out his tea. Shimei jumped in surprise. "What's wrong?" "Nothing." Moran waved his hands frantically, but internally he was swearing. Had he been training under Chuaning for so long that he'd also turned into Liu Xiaohe? Okay, I don't know that reference. I'll look it up when we get to that point. Behold, Campus's pavilion, a desolate place with not a soul around, where the peach blossoms swayed and two single men had been left alone with only each other for company. At any point in the past, Moran absolutely would have taken the opportunity to get all lovey-dovey with Shimei before actually getting down to business. What was with him recently? Acting all pure and frigid. Who even was he anymore? Moran scratched his head. Shimei blinked. Eyes met eyes, and Moran cracked a dopey smile, his dimples precious and cute. "The peach blossoms outside are beautiful. I'll go pick a branch for you to bring with you." "Plants are sentient. Just let them bloom properly on their branches," Shimei said. You're too right. Then I won't pick them." Okay, let me just quickly see. I think I'm quickly gonna take my break now because I just need to grab some water because my coffee is done. And I just wanna get a chance to see if I can clean up the chat. And then we shall resume. So yeah, just 10 minutes. I'll be right back. Okay, we are back. Sorry, that took like a minute longer than I anticipated. But yeah, let's quickly go back to where we were at. Okay. They sat there in silence, and Moran dug through everything he could find in his mind that could start a conversation. He soon realized that having only been able to meet up infrequently as of late, they didn't have anything worth talking about. When he looked up, he realized that Shimei had a thin sheen of sweat from helping him clean. Heart twigging in sympathy, he took out a handkerchief from his robes and handed it to him. For you to wipe yourself. Shimei lowered his lashes, glanced over, and when he saw that Moran was squeezing the handkerchief nervously, he could only smile. Thank you, he gently replied, then took the handkerchief and lightly dabbed his forehead. The feel of the cloth was light and soft, as it had been sewn with the best of silk. After Shimei used it, he said, I'll take the handkerchief back and wash it before I return it to you. Okie dokie, Moran answered promptly. His receptiveness to whatever Shimei wanted was practically ingrained by this point. If you like it, it's okay if you don't return it either. Shimei laughed. That wouldn't be right. Look how well made this handkerchief is. He opened it, smoothed out the creases to fold it again. Yet as his slender, delicate fingers felt over the spread handkerchief, Shimei paused, taken aback, and let out a soft sound of surprise. What is it? Shimei hesitated and looked up with a smile. Arjan really wants to give me this handkerchief? If you like it, then take it. What's mine is yours. Moran was generous. There was laughter in the depth of Shimei's eyes. Borrowing flowers from others to worship the Buddha, aren't you afraid that Shizun will find out and whip you? Ah. Interesting that he compared himself to Buddha, but I understand that this is just a turn of phrase. Huh? This time it was Moran's turn to be taken aback. What do you mean by borrowing flowers to worship the Buddha? What does Shizun have to do with this? Take a look yourself. Shimei's tone was a little unreasonable. Such a large high-tongue blossom. When did Shizun give you his own handkerchief? Oh, goodness. I'm trying to think, was that not Shasani who gave it to him? Maybe it was just Shizun and, like, I've forgotten something. Moran was dumbstruck. A long while passed before he snapped out of it, his entire face bright red as he waved his hands frantically. No, I don't know. It isn't mine. Where did my handkerchief go? Oh goodness. How am I gonna get out of this one? Moran stared at the square of silken cloth with a high-tongue flower sewn on a corner, but he couldn't for the life of him remember why he even had it. He racked his brain in a panic, then suddenly smacked his head. Ah! What is it? I remembered. Moran let out a sigh of relief and took the handkerchief from Shimei's hand with a smile. Sorry, this isn't mine, so I can't give it to you. Shimei fell silent. I didn't even say I wanted it to begin with. It's not Shizun's either. It's not like everything with a high tongue on it belongs to Shizun. Moran folded the handkerchief neatly and tucked it back into his robes, beyond relieved that he hadn't accidentally taken his Shizun's possession. It's Shashidi's. Sorry, Shashidi's. There we go. Shimei looked thoughtful. Shashidi's? Mm-hmm. We've been living together these last few days. I'm kind of glad though, but I'm scared that Shimei is gonna put things together before Moran does. So maybe I grabbed the wrong one from the drying rack this morning or something. Ha, how embarrassing. Shimei was silent for a moment, then he smiled gently and said, it's not a big deal. He stood. It's getting late. We should go pick up Shashidi. They left the house and headed for the cave. They didn't get far before Shimei started to slow down. It wasn't too obvious at first, but when he stumbled on a rock and would have fallen if Moran hadn't reacted quickly and caught him in time. Moran was shocked by Shimei's pallid complexion. What's wrong? It's nothing. Shimei took a deep breath. I didn't eat much for lunch, just feeling a little faint. Nothing a bit of rest won't fix. The more he tried to gloss over it, the more Moran worried. Now that he thought about it, Shimei wasn't great at Qigong, and everything here at Peach Blossom Spring, from food to clothes, cost feathers to purchase. Moran had always made sure to give Shimei some feathers, but he had been locked up for a few days now, and Shimei was too thoughtless to take care of anyone. Oh, damn, I didn't even think of that. The more Moran thought, the more concerned he grew. You used to skip lunch all the time back at the Sect too, but I've never seen you in such a state. Am I to believe that this is the result of only missing one meal? Tell me the truth. When was the last time you ate? Moran's expression grew even darker at Shimei's reluctance to answer. He grabbed Shimei and started walking in the opposite direction. Aran, where are we going? Shimei fretted. Where the food is, Rand said sharply, but when he turned around there was only worry in his eyes. Why didn't you take care of yourself while I was gone? You're always thinking about everyone else and putting others first. What about yourself? Have you ever thought about yourself? Moran dragged Shimei all the way to the tavern. Normally Shimei belonged to the healing division and shouldn't have been in the attack division region without a token. However, anxiety had run high ever since the incident with 18, so the Feather Tribe had lifted the restriction to ease things. What do you want? Order whatever. Anything's fine. Shimei seemed a bit guilty. Sorry. I wanted to come help, but I ended up getting in the way instead. No need for things like sorry between us. Moran flicked his forehead and gentled his tone. Go ahead and order. I'll pay for it, and then you can take your time eating. And all I can think about right now is Chuaning's soup growing cold while he waits for Moran, and now my heart is breaking, and I kind of hate it. Go ahead and order. I'll pay for it, and then you can take your time to eat. Shimei looked at him. What about you? I have to go pick up Shashidi. There is a guard at the cave, but I'm still worried. What with the killers still being out there? When Shimei realized that Moran wanted to leave, his eyes seemed to darken for an instant. Just 2 buns, then, he said quickly. I'll go with you and eat on the way. Moran was going to try and talk him out of it when a bird-like chitter of feminine voices came from outside. Some dozen young female cultivators, all primed up, entered the building while giggling. Hey, shopkeeper, I have a question, the lady at the head of the group said with a smile. Did Dashishung reserve the banquet room at the tavern tonight? This Dashishung is so mysterious. I wonder what his story is. Indeed, the shopkeeper said with a smile. It hadn't taken long for the Feather Tribe to figure out that Dashishung liked wine and song, so every single night they held a banquet at one tavern or another. Wherever this Dashishung went, a group of giggling ladies was sure to flock. Sure enough, the ladies were thrilled and immediately hurried to reserve their tables. Now and again, their words drifted over to Moran's ears. It was all, Xiaofang, how does the painting on my eyebrows look? Do you think Dashishong will like it? It's lovely. What do you think about my eyeliner? Is it too flashy? Will it make him think I'm flighty? And stuff like that. You're so pretty. Dashishong will like you for sure. Yesterday I saw him looking at you quite a few times. Stop teasing me. If only. Dashishong's type is definitely someone like Jie, refined and so well read. Moran had no words. Even in such troubled times, these ladies could flutter about like this over some guy. The corner of his mouth twitched, and he turned to Shimei. Buns it is, then. Let's grab and go. I'm worried if I leave you here alone in the cave of cavernous beasts. Shimei shook his head at Moran's expression, his laughter light. The tastiest thing on the menu at the tavern was their large, drool-worthy meat buns. Moran brought 10 at once and gave them all to Shimei. When Moran glanced at Shimei, nibbling happily at the buns as they walked, he was finally able to relax a little. I just find it so funny that it's always meat buns. I know I'm worried about Shasani, and Shimei is acting a little weird. It seems like he doesn't want Moran to go. Yeah, like there's just I have like a theory that Shimei has like two personalities, not in terms of like the mental kind. I'm talking about like a magical thing, like maybe a demon or something residing within him and like taking control whenever things are convenient for him. Because who would ever suspect Shimei? And also Shimei, as we know, is weak with Qinggong, so he would be like a very good target for something like that. But I feel like I might just be... I don't even want to call it too hopeful, because I don't actually want anything to happen to Shimei. But like, I think I'm just getting ahead of myself, basically. No one expected the ban to do Shimei in. His stomach was already weak to start with, so suddenly eating an oily bun after having had nothing in him for so long left him hurting in no time. Now Moran really couldn't leave to go pick up Shah Shidi. He carried a pale and sweaty Shimei back to Camps's pavilion in a frantic rush and laid him down on the bed he had tidied. Then he dashed out to ask for a physician. After giving him some medicine and warm water, Moran sat by the bed, filled with self-reproach, as he looked at Shimei's pallid face. Does it still hurt? Here, I'll rub your tummy. That word is such a weird word to me, I don't know why. But also, aren't they supposed to not be allowed to leave Camps's pavilion? Like, how far are they allowed to go if they're not allowed to leave the pavilion? Because that's confusing me now. Shimei's voice was quiet and weak. No need. It's okay. Moran's large and well-defined hands had already reached over to gently knead him through the quilt. Maybe it was because the pressure was just right and it felt good, but Shimei didn't protest. His breaths evened out under the attentive kneading, and he fell asleep. Moran stayed until Shimei was sound asleep before getting ready to leave. Before he stood, his hand was caught. Moran's eyes, black with a tinge of purple, widened. Shimei? It hurts. Don't leave. The beauty's eyes were still closed, and he seemed to be talking in his sleep. I'm not getting a good feeling about this. Moran stood locked in place. Shimei had never asked anyone for anything. He was always the one helping others without an expectation of receiving the same. Only while asleep would he be pleading with Moran to stay in such a soft voice. So Moran sat back down, gazing fondly at the face that he yearned for day and night, while continuing to massage his stomach. Outside the lattice window, peach blossom petals drifted lazily by as the sky darkened. Can I just go cry? I hate this so much. No. Like, I wouldn't be as opposed to it were I not so overtly aware of the fact that it's gonna hurt Chuaning to find out that he'd been abandoned once more for Shimei. Like, he can never be as good as Shimei, from his perspective, and it just sucks. By the time Moran remembered that he told his little Shidi he'd be back for dinner, it was already midnight. Oh no! Moran jumped to his feet, smacking his head over and over. Oh no, oh no, oh no. By then, Shimei was deeply asleep. Moran dashed outside and was about to sprint to the cave when a blue light flashed in the sky, and the Shinji elder descended from above with a child in his arms, a child who held a little clay jar. Shinji elder. Shinji shot Moran a reproachful glance. What happened? Didn't you say you were going to pick him up? If I hadn't been concerned and gone to check on him after all, you... my disciple would have had to wait in the caves till dawn. This disciple was wrong. Moran lowered his head, but nonetheless lifted his eyes to look at Chuaning. Shidi. Shinji put Chuaning down. Chuaning, still holding the clay jar, looked calmly at Moran. Have you eaten yet? Moran hadn't expected that to be the first thing he said, and he could only reply dumbly, Not yet. So Chuaning walked over and offered him the jar. Have some, he said mildly. It's still warm. Can we just form a Chuaning protection squad, I beg of you? This sucks so much. Moran stood there motionless for a while. By the time he came back around, he had already pulled the little guy into a hug along with his clay jar. Okay, I will. The silly child had been worried that the soup might go cold, and he'd taken off his outer robe to wrap it around the jar. His small body felt a bit chilly in Moran's arms. Moran pressed their foreheads together, nuzzling him softly, and for the first time in 2 lives, he spoke these words and meant it. Sorry, it was my fault. They bid Shinji good night and went inside the pavilion. Okay, maybe all hope is not lost, because I don't think he ever would have done something like this before. Chuaning's outer robe was now too wrinkled to wear, and Moran worried that Shidi might need the warmth, so he went to the inner room to find him a blanket. Chuaning yawned and climbed onto the wooden bench holding the clay jar, and he was about to take out the 2 bowls for the soup when his gaze landed on the meat buns that Shimei hadn't finished. He blinked, silent. Hopping off the bench, Chuaning walked over to the bedroom and looked expressionlessly at that beautiful person. No, I spoke too soon. At that beautiful person lying on the bed inside. He neither grew angry nor said a word, but icy tendrils swept out of his bones, and he felt his heart, so warm only a moment ago, freeze into a solid block of ice. When Moran returned to the kitchen, Chuaning was sitting at the table next to the window as before, with one foot on the bench and the other dangling off it, an arm propped casually on the windowsill. When he heard Moran's movements, he turned his head a little and sent a glance at Moran. Here, I found a firefox fur blanket. Bundle up, it's a cold night. Chuaning didn't reply. Moran walked over and handed him the blanket, but Chuaning didn't take it. He only shook his head and slowly closed his eyes, as if resting. What's wrong? You don't like it? Still no reply. I'll go see if there's a different one then, Moran said with a smile as he ruffled Chuaning's hair. But when he turned to go look for another blanket, he realized that the clay jar was no longer on the table. He stared in confusion. Where'd my soup go? Who said it was yours? Chuaning finally spoke, his voice wintry. It's mine. The corner of Moran's lips twitched. He figured that the kid was throwing a tantrum. Okie dokie, yours then. Where did your soup go? I threw it away, Chuaning said flatly. Threw? Guys, this feels like watching a train wreck for the 500th time, and it's just as bad as watching it the first time. Oh. Chuaning went back to ignoring him. He hopped lightly off the bench and opened the door to leave. Hey, Shidi? Shidi, where are you going? Moran forgot all about the blanket. The killer was still at large, and it wasn't safe out there, and hastily chased after him. He spied the small clay jar under the peach blossom tree. It hadn't been thrown out after all. Moran let out a breath. This was his own fault not to start with. His little Shudi had probably been trying to hold in his resentment earlier, but then been unable to hold it in any longer and let it out despite himself. And he had even every right to do so. So Moran walked over and sat down next to Chuaning, who had seated himself under the peach blossom tree. Ignoring Moran, Chuaning grabbed a little clay jar, opened the lid, took out a ladle larger than his face, and tried to reach in. But the ladle wouldn't fit, and he threw it aside in a fit of anger. The ladle struck the ground with a crack and broke into pieces, and the boy sat there, holding the jar, in a daze. Just drink right out of it, Moran suggested, his head turning sideways and cheek propped up. It's just the two of us here anyway. No need to be embarrassed. Chuaning did not deign to respond. No? I'm going to drink if you don't. It's the first time my Shidi has made soup for me. I'm not going to let it go to waste. Moran teased as he reached for the jar with a grin. To his surprise, Chuaning slapped his hand away. Get lost. Dumbstruck, Moran blinked. This exchange left him a bit of a deja vu. Then he scooted back over with a grin on his thick face. Shidi, I was wrong. Please don't be mad anymore. I was gonna go pick you up hours ago, but your Mingjing Shishong suddenly fell ill, so I was delayed. I didn't mean to leave you waiting. Chuaning kept his head down and said nothing. No, really, I was so busy the whole time, and I hadn't eaten yet. I'm starving. Moran tugged on his sleeve pitifully. Shidi, my kind Shidi, my good Shidi, please, may Shishong have some soup? Chuaning continued to say nothing, but he eventually moved to place the jar of soup on the ground. He lifted his head a little and tilted it to the side a bit before turning away again, meaning for Moran to help himself if he wanted. Moran grinned. Thanks, Shidi. The little jar was stuffed full. A single glance, and Moran could tell that Shidi hadn't eaten much, leaving him the majority of the meat. It was actually mostly meat with a little bit of soup. Moran stared for a bit, eyes lit with amusement. Are you sure this is soup? He teased gently. Looks more like chicken stew to me. Shidi is so generous. Still, no response. Moran stopped chattering then. After spending half the day taking care of Shimei, he really was starving. Besides, Shidi had worked so hard to make the soup, he couldn't possibly let the kid's good intentions go to waste. He broke off two small branches from the peach tree, smoothed them into a pair of chopsticks with a flare of spiritual energy from his fingertips, and got right down to stuffing a piece of chicken in his mouth. Whoa! Delicious! Moran said around a mouthful of steamy chicken. It's really good. My Shidi is so capable. In truth, it wasn't that good, and it was a bit salty too, but Moran still dug in heartily to make his little Shidi happy, plowing through most of the chicken in a short order. The entire time, Chuaning sat there quietly without looking at him. Moran gulped down a big mouthful of soup. It was even saltier than the meat, so much so that it was practically bitter, but it was still bearable. He scooped up another drumstick and was about to shove it in his mouth when he froze. How many legs does a chicken have? Of course there was no reply, so he answered himself. 2. Moran looked at the drumstick held between his chopsticks, then looked at the bone from the other drumstick that he'd eaten. After a long moment of silence, the idiot finally lifted his head, dazed, and asked Chuaning, Shidi, were you... He didn't have the courage to say the rest. Were you waiting for me this whole time, and so haven't even eaten yet? Yes, he did, and you need to, feel sorry. Hi, how are you? I'm happy to see you in the live as well. The jar of soup is all meat. It's because you waited for me for so long that all the soup boiled off and there was only meat left, so that's all that was left to put in the jar. Only to have me think that you'd already eaten, and just left some for me, that you'd cooked it wrong and turned the chicken soup into chicken stew. Moran put the clay jar down wordlessly. He had realized too late there was hardly any meat left. Chuaning finally spoke. His voice was still calm, even, with a bit of youthfulness. You said you would be back for dinner, so I waited, he said slowly, tonelessly. If you don't want it anymore, then at least send word so I'm not waiting like an idiot, okay? Shidi. Chuaning was still facing away, refusing to look at him. Moran couldn't see his expression. Have someone pass me a message that you're gonna go keep Ming Jishong company instead. Would it have been that hard? I mean, it's very fair, and I really hope that Moran learns his lesson from this, because it is actually a little bit cruel. I've experienced waiting for someone like that, and it's very painful. Because you also don't necessarily even know if something happened to the person, especially because we know there's a murderer out, and that murderer is specifically targeting Moran. So can you imagine all the scenarios that went through Chuaning's head while he was waiting? You took my jar and rambled so much for eating, but you didn't even ask if I'd eaten yet. Would that have been so hard? Moran had no reply. Would it have been so hard to check and see how many drumsticks were in the jar first? That last one sounded a little funny. Even through all his remorse, Chuaning could only smile. But his dimple froze before they even had formed. His little Shudi was crying. No, and I don't have a pillow with me. Oh no. I'm not prepared for this. I'm glad he's getting to say all the things that he's been wanting to say to Moran without Moran connecting it to Chuaning, because it's kind of necessary for Moran to start realizing this. Chuaning never would have cried over such a minor thing in his adult form. No one had realized that, although being turned into a child by the willow sap hadn't affected his mind that much, there had been some impact after all. His temperament became more childish whenever he was tired or overexerted himself. This hidden property of the sap was extremely difficult to detect, so neither Madame Wang nor the Tan Lang elder had noticed it when taking his pulse. I also feel hunger and sadness. I'm human too. Even with that younger mentality in the foreground of his mind, Chuaning still clung to his self-restraint, fighting back sobs without a sound, but his shoulders shook uncontrollably as tears well and fell from his reddened eyes. All those years, the Yuheng elder had always endured silently. No one liked him, no one kept him company, and he always feigned nonchalance as he walked through the reverent crowd, lofty and composed. Only with his mind tinged by childish thoughts could he break down and speak the truth, let out the misery that had built up within him for so long. It's a miracle this man is still standing. It wasn't that he didn't care for those around him, only that he did it quietly. Such quiet, oh, that's a new word, such quietude day after day, without anyone to see or notice, was also a kind of torment. As Moran watched the as Moran watched the minute shivering of his little Shidi's shoulders, his heart clenched, and he reached out to soothe him. His hand was slapped away before it made contact. Shidi, don't touch me. Chuaning always put up a strong front, regardless of his age. He firmly wiped away his tears and stood. I'm going to bed. You can keep your Shidi company. Just stay away from me. There was an awkward moment of silence. In Chuaning's indignation, he had forgotten that Shimei was older than Moran. Moran opened his mouth to say something, but Chuaning had left. He disappeared into the other bedroom, and the door slammed shut with a loud bang. There was only 2 bedrooms in the courtyard of campus pavilion. Moran had been planning to let Shimei sleep in one, while he squeezed into the other with his little Shidi, but it looked like his Shidi's room was out of the question, given how he was so mad he'd even locked the door. Moran didn't want to climb into bed with Shimei either, not to mention having been scolded by his little Shidi, and even made him cry. Moran's head was a complete mess. He wasn't in any mood to think about any kind of flirting. I'm so glad he has at least some priorities. So he simply sat there in the courtyard in a daze, surrounded by peach blossoms in full bloom, holding the clay jar that his little Shidi had brought him all the way from the cave. A long while later, he sighed and slapped himself across the face, cursing in a low voice, "You good-for-nothing." And so Moran spent the night, with the earth as his bed, and the sky as his blanket, lying on the ground, covered in fallen peach blossoms, staring blankly at the sky. His little Shidi, Shimei, Shizun, Shumeng, the fake Guchen from Jincheng Lake, the unknown killer, Chushun, and his son in the illusion. A series of hazy figures flashed through Moran's mind. He vaguely felt like something was off, but the feeling was so faint that it disappeared before he really noticed. Peach blossoms bloomed splendidly, their petals drifting gently down. Moran caught a fallen blossom in his hand, holding the perished flower up against the moonlight. He recalled the final moments of his previous life, when he had laid himself down in the coffin he had prepared ahead of time. That day, the sky had also been adrift with fallen blossoms, soundless and fragrant. Only the blossoms back then had been from a high-tongue tree. High-tongue. The person he liked, in this life and the last, was Shimei, but for some reason, moments before death, he had chosen to bury himself under the high-tongue tree, in front of the heaven-piercing tower where he had first met Chuaning. So his subconsciousness knows the truth, at least. But clearly, it has yet to reach his conscious mind. Many of the things Moran had done in his past life now frightened him so much to think about. The more time passed since his rebirth, the less he understood why he had been so cruel, slaughtering entire cities, oppressing the weak, killing his master, even forcing Chuaning to do things like that with him. Moran tossed the peach blossom away and laid his hand across his forehead, then slowly closed his eyes. The words his little Shidi had said earlier, "I also feel hunger and sadness. I'm human too," circled in his mind. The one who had said it had been his little Shidi, but for an instant Moran saw the silhouette of another person, a person dressed in snow-white robes. This hurts so much. Then he blinked, and the white robes became red wedding robes. Oh? That dragged on the ground. It was just the way they had looked on that man during the ceremony in the ghost mistress's illusion. I'm human too. I also feel sorrow and pain, Moran. I also feel pain. A suffocating pressure suddenly filled Moran's heart, as if something was trying to burst out. A sheen of cold sweat covered his forehead. He squeezed his eyes shut, drawing labored breaths, and murmured, "I'm sorry." He didn't know to whom he was apologizing, to his little Shidi, or that person in wedding robes. I don't know how to feel right now. Let me just see what the time is. This is like one of the longest lives ever, and I think it's all just because this is such a painful read. Like, I think the worst times are these moments where Chuaning is so clearly in so much pain and Moran is so clueless about it. Inside his bedroom, Shimei sat up. Padding quietly over to the window without turning on the lights, he looked through the gap in the shutters. He gazed from afar as Moran, lying among the fallen petals with an arm wrapped around that clay jar, his own eyes dark, and his thoughts unknowable. Yeah, see, these are the kinds of lines that make me really worry. Early the next morning, Moran wrinkled his nose where he lay in the flowers and grass, inhaling a deep breath of the fresh air and stretching lazily before getting up. He only got halfway through the stretch when a shriek shattered the peace at Camps's pavilion. Ah! Moran's eyes flew open as he rolled to his feet. The sight before him made his blood run cold, and all he could do was stare in shock. Each and every one of the 15 feathered tribe elites assigned to guard Camps's pavilion had been murdered overnight, and in the exact same manner as 18. Oh my word! This is a freaking disaster. I don't know how they're ever going to get out of this, and I feel like we're not going to find out in this volume, which is going to drive me insane, and my camera just shut off. That's great. Let me quickly grab another battery. Just give me a moment. Okay, sorry about that. Okay, the camera's a little bit skew right now, but it's fine. Okay, let's get back to business. I hope the audio is still okay. I mean, it shouldn't have changed, but yeah. What does it feel like we're gonna finish this volume by like next week? Maybe not quite, but I feel like it's getting close to the end. Damn it. Okay. All of them dangled amidst a grove of peach trees in full bloom, their crimson sleeves drifting in the breeze, and long skirts reaching to the ground. Their bodies swayed in time with the wind like so many preserved flowers, eerie yet uncannily beautiful. The one who had screamed was a low-ranking member of the feathered tribe who had come to deliver breakfast. She trembled in fright, the bamboo basket she'd held now lying on the ground, congee and pastries spilled everywhere. She trembled even more violently upon seeing Moran stand in the courtyard and reached behind her for something. Why? Okay, answer me this. Why on earth would someone murder all these people, then stick around to be captured? Just why? Also, you saw him sleeping, so are you suggesting that he murdered all of them and then just took a nap because he was that tired about it? Like, the logic is missing. It's missing dearly. Moran stepped forward without thinking. No, wait, it's not what. It was too late. She had activated the seal of imminent crisis tattooed on her lower back. The seal functioned as an urgent summons to the Feather Tribe, and in an instant the people of the Feather Tribe across Peach Blossom Springs sprouted fiery wings and descended upon Campus's pavilion. They were stunned by the sight that greeted them. Ajia! Gia! After the initial shocked silence, they erupted in screams and wails. The commotion drew cultivators as well. In an instant, shock and suspicion, anger and grief surrounded Campus's pavilion. Moran, what defense could you possibly have at this point? Murderer! Lunatic! The gathered people of the Feather Tribe were beyond furious as they screamed and cried. He has to pay with his life. Kill him! Kill him! I kind of just want to smack them, but I understand that you're not like the brightest when you're going through grief. It would have been a struggle for Moran to defend himself even if he had 100 mouths to argue, and he only had one. If I really was the killer, and I could kill all of them this easily, then why would I stay? To wait and get caught? You shut up, spat a feathered tribe member with a flame-red hair and tear-stained face. You've already gone this far, and you still dare to? If you're not the killer, then why was everyone but you killed? Someone else snarled. That's right, deceitful and treacherous. Even if you aren't the killer, he's absolutely related to you. Why else would he not kill you, huh? Blood for blood. Moran was so mad that he wanted to laugh. He had slaughtered with wanton abandon in his past life, and hardly anyone had ever dared to say something like blood for blood to him. Yet now, when he wasn't actually the killer, he was being accused to high heavens. The world was truly... He closed his eyes for a moment and was about to say something else when a crimson light shot through the sky. The elder immortal of the Feathered Tribe descended lightly from a cloud and coldly scanned her surroundings, her expression exceedingly dark. Moweya, elder immortal. The elder immortal stared him down for a while, then walked over to one of the corpses and lifted the blood-stained willow vine wrapped around its neck. Where is your weapon? Take it out and show me. Moran was silent. Are you refusing? Moran let out a sigh. His weapon was Jingyu. A large number of people had already seen it during training, and a bunch more had seen it at the site of 18's murder. If he were to take it out now, it would compare with the willow vines around the necks of the murdered guards, and doubtlessly it would be used to implicate him. But if he refused, it would be like he had a guilty conscience. A scarlet blaze appeared with a whoosh in his palm as Jangya took form, coursing with a fiery crackling flare. Feel free to look, elder immortal. This is just great. We love it when one of our main characters is framed and there's no hope. But also, like, how is it that the willow vine around all the feathered tribes' necks just conveniently looks like his, but isn't his? Like, I don't think you can just randomly split up your holy weapon like that and leave traces of it everywhere. Like, wouldn't you just pull it back out? Why would you need to leave it embedded in their necks as proof that you committed the murder? None of it makes sense. What's the time? Okay. Chapter 75. This venerable one is illiterate. Deal with it. I mean, fair. At this point, I kind of wish I was illiterate as well, so I didn't have to read through this torture, but also then I would miss all the goodness, so we can't have both. The gathered crowd gawked at Zhang Yue, then looked at the blazing red willow vine wrapped around the necks of the murdered, and grew even more agitated. You did it! Just like when you killed 18. How could you be so cruel? Kill him! The clamor hurt the elder immortal's head. With a hand pressed against her temple, she said coldly, Moweyu, I ask you one last time. Did you or did you not kill them? I did not. Very well. The elder immortal nodded. Moran let out a breath, thinking she was going to let him go. Moran, my sweet summer child, are you really this clueless? Greetings from Wild Cheese Discord? That's so random, but hi! Yeah, no, I love Wild Cheese videos. Anyway, okay, sorry, that threw me off, but that's so cool. Where am I? Moran let out a breath, thinking she was going to let him go. He was about to express his gratitude for her wisdom and righteousness when she lifted a hand in a gesture of indifference. This person has committed myriad transgressions and refuses to admit to his crimes, she said in an icy tone. Seize him. When Shimei came outside after washing up and getting dressed, he saw Moran being restrained with magic by over a dozen high-level members of the feathered tribe, while another tied his wrists with an immortal binding rope. Where is Chuaning in his grown-up form when you need him? What are you doing? All color drained out of Shimei's face as he hurried to Moran's side. What's happened? No one replied, but the corpses were swaying eerily between the peach blossoms. Were awesome. Answer, enough, damn it. Shimei drew in a sharp breath and took a step back, bumping into Moran's chest. Aran, don't panic, calm down. Moran kept his eyes on the elder immortal while whispering to Shimei, go get uncle and the Shinji elder. With the situation being what it was, the feathered tribe might not be open to reason. If they decided to rip him apart no matter what he said, he had zero chance of winning, not with his current abilities. He needed Shu Jinyong and Shinji to step in as soon as possible. Shimei left, and Moran stood alone against the faces twisted with rage, his gaze steady as he glanced them over one by one. Pah! A gob of plague? I'm not sure, but I'm assuming it's just like spit. Flew out of the crowd towards him. Moran moved to dodge, but the feathered folk who had spit was too close, and it caught him anyway. He turned around slowly and came face to face with a pair of scarlet eyes. You killed so many people and you dare to call for help? I'm going to put you down right now. With that, a fury blaze gathered in a feathered tribe folk's palm and hurtled directly towards Moran. Moran stepped back to the side. The scorched fire singed his bangs as it shot past and crashed into the peach tree behind him, snapping the sturdy trunk in half. Thud! The peach tree fell over. Flowers scattered across the ground like snow in the wind. I am so frustrated with how unreasonable they're being. Because on the one hand, I want to be very lenient towards them because grief is really not an emotion that helps you see clearly, but the fact of the matter is they're okay with potentially killing him only to later then discover that they were wrong, and then they're just gonna shrug their shoulders of it and be like, oh, oops. So that is what's really making it hard for me to be nice about it. Moran looked over at the tree on the ground, then turned to the attacker. I already said I didn't kill them. The purity poles will be ready in 10 days. If you want revenge, you could at least wait till then. 10 days? We'll have murdered everyone here by then. His attacker roared furiously and lunged at Moran. Give me back my zizi. Moran dodged the attack once again, and his eyes landed on the elder immortal looking on from the side. She had no intention whatsoever of stopping this. Moran felt a flare of rage and raised his voice in a bellow. Hey, you old bird! Get a grip on your people! No response. Moran cursed under his breath when she still refused to budge. Pretending to be deaf-mute at this juncture. You want to watch me get burned to death or something? If I'd known you were so crappy, couldn't even tell right from wrong, I wouldn't have come to this hellhole to start with. Who wants to get incriminated like this for no reason? The elder immortal's expression twitched slightly, and there was a fierce twop as she lifted her sleeve in a sweeping flourish that landed right on Moran's face. I'm also trying really hard to remind myself that he did murder them in a past life, but they don't know that, so they have no right to treat someone who's potentially innocent like this. The feathered tribe looked like humans, but their way of thinking was quite alien. In the cultivation world, not even the head of a small martial hall, much less the leader of an entire tribe, would jump to the conclusions without definitive proof. But in the end, the feathered tribe were half beast, and their blood ran thicker than with their bestial nature. Okay, so there's that as well. The color of the elder immortal's hair changed from black to bright scarlet, and what looked like steam rolled from every strand. Her eyes opened wide in a glare as she said darkly, "Who is your master? Who taught such an uncouth disciple? Watch your mouth." At her words, the rest of the feathered tribe began to shriek, one after another, and closed in on Moran with murder written in their crimson eyes. Whoosh! An arrow of flame pierced through the sky, flying directly towards Moran's heart. Frick, I'm worried. Moran dared not dismiss the threat, and sparks coursed through Jangye as he dodged while brandishing the willow vine. The shot was only a feint, and when he turned to block, one of the feathered tribe, bereft, rushed his back with a sword drawn. Arrow at the fore, sword at the rear, there was no way out. These half-beasts meant to kill him right here. Moran steeled himself, called to mind how Chuaning had wielded Tianwen before, and raised his hand with a flick of his wrist. Jangye was flung into the air, and then abruptly pulled taut. The blood-red willow vine whirled in a blur and created a massive vortex. The leaves on the vine instantly turned knife-sharp as the maelstrom pulled in everything in its vicinity, even the air itself, and shredded it all to pieces. It was one of Chuaning's ultimate techniques. Wind. With his vine at the eye of the storm, everything surrounding Moran pulled in by powerful spiritual energy, swallowed by the vortex, ground into dust, and swept away by the wind until nothing remained. Ah! The attacker screamed. Her arrow had been pulverized by Jangye, and her long sword was lost in the storm as well, too close to rescue. Clang! There came a sharp sound of metal breaking, and before anyone could react, she had also been pulled to the edge of the blood-red storm as she shrieked, "Let me go, you lunatic!" Yeah, see, this is what I'm scared about, because he was innocent before, but now that he's, had to defend himself, he might end up accidentally killing someone, and then they're just gonna, use that as proof to him, being able to kill someone, and therefore it means that he must have killed all these other people. And I don't think they're gonna be able to prove him innocent then. The elder immortal was infuriated by the sight of her own people endangered. Her red robes fluttered as she rose into the air. A brilliant red crystal of high purity appeared in her hand, and her sleeves billowed as she channeled spiritual energy into it. A frenzied gale roared to life, sweeping clouds along the flattened grass and trees alike. The image of a fire phoenix blazed into being behind her. Her eyes were deep, unsettling red, and that originally beautiful face twisted. "Bastard," she hissed. "Still not standing down. You've called out your phoenix. If I stop now, wouldn't that just be asking for death?" As Moran spoke, the phoenix cast a massive shadow over him, its fiery reflection dancing across his face. You stop first, then I will. You! The elder immortal rose even higher into the air. Have. Her blood-red eyes stared Moran down as she spit out each syllable. No right to make demands of me. An explosive sound came from above. Then the phoenix dove towards Moran with a screech. Bang! Another deafening sound, louder than the last, like the awakening of an ancient dragon from its 1,000 years of slumber, as it smashed through stone and earth to burst forth from the depth of the ground. The phoenix was met by a golden light, and the force of the impact sent shock waves through the air. Please let it be Chuaning. I know that he kind of can't, because then it'll reveal his true form, or like the fact that he is Chuaning. But like, Moran's in danger. This is dire. We need your help. The weaker members of the feathered tribe shrieked as the gales bashed into them. Some even spat blood as they were thrown dozens of feet away. The tempest swept through Camps's pavilion, instantly obliterating trees and buildings until they were leveled to the ground. When the dust settled, a slender, familiar figure was in the air in front of Moran, shielding him. Shizun? Robes white as snow, sleeves billowing in the wind. When he heard Moran's call, his face turned slightly, his expression as cold and composed as ever, and his phoenix eyes swept over Moran, where he knelt on the ground. Chuaning's voice was cold and deep, like clear water from a well on a hot summer's day. Are you injured? Moran was too stunned to react. His eyes were wide as his mouth opened in shock, and he gaped wordlessly. Chuaning looked him up and down, and detected no obvious injuries, so he turned back to the elder immortal. Weren't you asking who his master was a moment ago? He released his terrifyingly potent spiritual energy and slowly descended to the ground, where he said, simply and sharply, with not a single superfluous word, Chuaning of Shizun Peak, show me your best move. Ooh, I'm kind of here for it and kind of terrified at the same time. What? Chuaning frowned. It looked like these people didn't understand etiquette. That was fine by him. He was out of patience. I said, I'm his master. A pause. And I don't remember giving you permission to hurt my disciple. The elder immortal might have been called an immortal, but this was only on account of her noble bloodline. She was far from actually immortal. In their exchange moments ago, Chuaning had shattered her phoenix, and Tianwen had slashed her arm. She wore a sour expression as she held her limb, black blood seeping from between her fingers. How dare you, a mere mortal? Who let you into Peach Blossom Springs? How did you even get in here? She was almost crazed. You conceited slash. Tianwen appeared as summoned and lashed straight at her face, splitting the corner of her lips and spilling blood. This is great. This is not at all a problem. Yes? Go on, Chuaning said with a cold smile as he smoothed down his sleeve, which had fallen slightly askew while he brandished Tianwen. Then he grabbed Moran by the collar and dragged him upright with one hand, eyes never once leaving the elder immortal. You were saying? I'm a conceited what? How dare you? Why wouldn't I dare? Chuaning gazed at her unimpressed. What ought I be afraid of? He paused, then pulled Moran closer. Listen up. This person is mine. I'm taking him. Chuaning, you said what? Come again? I didn't hear you clearly the first time. Shizun. Oh, wait, sorry, I skipped a paragraph. Moran hadn't even recovered from his shock at Chuaning's sudden godlike descent before he was smashed into smithereens by the words, this person is mine. Yeah, no, same, Moran, I feel you. Shizun. Shut your trap. Chuaning's face was as impassive as ever, but Moran could clearly see the anger simmering in his eyes. All you ever do is bring me trouble. Can't do anything right. This scold was punctuated by a slap to the back of his head. Then Chuaning took off into the air with Moran in tow, and he was dozens of feet away in a single leap. By the time Moran realized what was happening, they were at the barren outskirts of Peach Blossom Springs. Shizun, my Shadi is still back there. Chuaning glanced at him and let out a cold at the panic on his face. Shadi? The one named Xia? Yes, he's still at Camps's pavilion. I have to go and save him. Chuaning lifted a hand to interrupt. I already sent him to Xianji with a spell. There's no need to worry. Moran finally let out a breath he was holding and lifted his eyes to look at Chuaning. Shizun, why are you here? Okay, but isn't Shimei also maybe going to be in trouble? I mean, maybe the fact that he is simply just, like, from Sishan Peak won't get him in trouble, but I don't know, I'm still worried because the Feather Tribe don't seem like reasonable beings, shall we say? Chuaning had been woken by the commotion outside his room, and when he saw that the situation was dire, he had quickly taken one of Tanlang's pills to temporarily regain his adult form. He couldn't explain that to Moran right now, so he only said, icy as ever, "Why can't I be here?" Then he lifted a hand and manifested a golden high tongue on the tip of his finger. Withered blooms outside the wistful tower. Night and spring breezed down the high-tongued river. Chuaning lowered his lashes and blew gently on the flower bud, which instantly bloomed with a flourish of resplendent light. He flicked his slender fingertips and gave it a quiet command. Seek. The high-tongued flower drifted away with the wind and disappeared into the forest. Shizun, what spells that? Moran asked curiously. Flower toss. Huh? Flower toss. Chuaning's expression was totally serious, without the slightest hint of humor. It didn't have a name, but since you ask, I've given it one. Moran's mouth hung open. The guy could not possibly be this lazy. He can, and he is, and we love it about him. The sect leaders already told me what happened. Chuaning gazed in the direction where the high tongue had gone, voice deep and cold as always, like jade in the flow of a stream. The person responsible for these events is likely also responsible for the incidents at Jincheng Lake. I'm afraid that the Zhenlong chess formation has been performed here at Peach Blossom Springs as well. Moran was startled. How could that be? He had excelled at the Zhenlong chess formation in his previous lifetime, and when 18 was killed, he had checked for signs of its use. This forbidden technique was always accompanied by the stench of blood. Once unsealed, murder was inevitable. So, one only had to look for intense, yet seemingly unfounded resentful energy to determine whether the Zhenlong chess formation had indeed been deployed in the vicinity. If the mysterious person had indeed used that forbidden technique again, he would have had to pull it off perfectly. Otherwise, Moran would have been able to detect it. There was a tinge of suspicion in the look Chuaning threw him, and Moran hurried to explain himself. I mean, they're all half immortal at Peach Blossom Springs. How could they miss a forbidden technique being used here? Chuaning shook his head. This person has already proven themselves capable of controlling the ancient spirit beasts of Jincheng Lake. Although spirit beasts can't hope to compare to holy beasts in terms of strength, they're equivalent to demi-immortals. As he was able to control Jincheng Lake, he is very likely doing the same at Peach Blossom Springs right now. I see. Moran lifted his head and bashfully grinned. The bashful grin on his face framed with dimples. Shizun? What does equivalent mean? I'm kind of glad he asked, because I was like, is this a typo for equivalent? Chuaning gave him a look. What does it mean? If anyone knows, let me know, because apparently it's a word that I do not know. Okay, I think I am gonna end it here. Oh my word, we're like 10 minutes past the supposed ending time. Okay, yeah, so we are on page 340. I think we did like a decent amount today, I have to say. But yeah, I am gonna end it here. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Thank you so much for accompanying me tonight, and otherwise I'll see you guys again next week. 再见。